We're starting. We're live. Hello. It's NFL Talk UK. I'm Tom Julian. I'm joined as ever by coach and Sky Sports analyst Jeff Reinebold. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing very good, my man.
Yeah?
Very good. You look outstanding today, by the way.
I'm not sure. My hair feels a bit unkempt and I haven't had a shave, but I had to go to head office today. And you know, when you go to head office, you've got to put the shirt on.
Well, I thought you were either going to trial or going to head office number two.
Well, yeah, and that's the reason Ben isn't here. Actually, he's gone to trial. No, I'm joking. He has not. He had to go to work tonight, so we're wishing him well. Hopefully, the night goes smoothly for him. But it's just the two of us, and we're going to put the NFL world to rights, aren't we?
Absolutely. A lot to talk about, man.
What a week it's been, eh? Where do you want to start? Do you want to start in New York? Do you want to start in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh? What do you want to do?
I think we ought to start in Cleveland because that's the most up to date we have, and Sashi Brown losing his job today. I hate to see anybody lose their job in this business. Such a cold business. You know, we have a saying inside the business. You know, we all love football. Football doesn't love anybody. And today, football didn't love Sashi Brown, and he lost his job. I think you look at it, Tommy, and I think that the fact he passed on Carson Wentz, the fact he passed on Deshaun Watson, and then an internal struggle, basically a power struggle ensued, and he lost, and he's out the door.
Yeah. Do you think it's one of those, isn't it? I mean, Sashi Brown, general manager of the Cleveland Browns, been there 2 seasons, 1-27 record. It doesn't look very good for him, does it?
No, but you know what? I had a couple of communications on Twitter. We kind of batted that back and forth. It's hard to blame the personnel guys for a 1-21 football team that underachieves. Now, if they hadn't provided the coaches with the talent, then certainly that's where you got to look. But in this case, when you look at what they did in the short time he was there, because it really was just 2 years, you look at what he did in the short time he was there, and I think it's really difficult to justify making that move. Their roster has improved markedly over that time. They've gotten younger. They've stockpiled draft picks. They've done all the things that you need to do in a rebuild. But this is what happens in a rebuild when public opinion, the court of public opinion is so strong, and the owner eventually just decides that he's had enough. Obviously, the coaches are constantly trying to protect themselves, and this is what happens. They start going like this: everybody's to blame except them. And I have a hard time with being one in whatever they are, which is basically 1 in 2 seasons, and seeing a guy that was a personnel guy go. I just don't understand that. I think that if they're going to make changes, then they have to again recognize that. Do we have enough players? Well, you don't have everybody that you want, but you're good enough to certainly have won 4, 5, 6 games over that time, and that hasn't happened.
They've come pretty close, haven't they? Like some of their losses have come in overtime, or they've lost on a late field goal, something like that. They deserve more. I think it should be said that they deserve more than 1 win.
Well, and again, you think about the players, because I always go back to the kids, to the players, to the guys that are out there battling every week, and certainly you feel for the fans, but it's the players that I identify with the most, and it's just unfortunate. They're good enough defensively. You look at that defense keeps them in games every week, and offensively they're not anywhere close to being good enough. Josh Gordon was a huge plus for him last week, 4 catches, 85 yards, and if he can keep himself, right, I'm happy for him. I'm really rooting for the kid, because again, you want to see a guy succeed. If you think about it, Tommy, here's a guy that has elite level skills, and if he did what he did over the course of his young career under the influence like he said he was every time he went out to play, imagine what he'll be able to do when he's clean and sober. I think so. I'm rooting hard for Josh Gordon.
I've heard a couple of analysts say that he's one of the best raw talents that they've ever seen.
Well, he has, and this is a really, really tough comparison, but he's in that Julio Jones, Megatron, that level of physical ability. He's got length, he's got speed, he's got strength, he can get in and out of his breaks, he can drop his hips, he can do all the things that you want a great receiver to do. again, that's really, 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 rare company, but he has that type of body. He has that kind of ability.
I heard Hugh Jackson say over the last couple of days that he didn't employ an offensive coordinator because he didn't want to give him that job because it was such a bad roster. Do you see that? I mean, a lot of people have blown that out of order.
I tell you what, I really struggle with that one,
because
you look at it and you say on the offensive line they've done an amazing job of getting better, and they're certainly, if you look at offensive lines in the National Football League, they're in the top half. Obviously the receiving thing has been an issue, but they've got some young kids that I think can play if Gordon can stay healthy and do the right things. He's obviously a Pro Bowl caliber player. And Njoku, the tight end, we saw last week, he has all kinds of ability, Tom. I mean, that kid is just, he's so young. He's 21 years old. He can run, he can jump, he's got great size. He's all of the things you want in a tight end. And so when you look at that and you say, that to me is a cop-out. And, again, I'm a Hugh Jackson fan, but I'm not a fan of guys pointing the finger and blaming other people. And, the reality of it is they're good enough on defense to win. They're, you look at their personnel, the personnel is considerably better than it's been. What I'm concerned about, and I think this is something I would share with the Cleveland Browns fans out there, is, if you're a Brownie fan, you got to be concerned about, okay, and now we're going to blow it up and start all over again. I'm just telling you, that is the recipe for failure. And, you look at how many general managers they've had in their career, in the last 15 years, how many quarterbacks they've had in the last 15 years, how many head coaches they've had in the last 15 years. They need stability.
You've seen it close range, Coach. You've been in a bunch of setups. How important is the relationship between the GM and the head coach? We often see if a new GM comes in, they like to pick their head coach. How important is that going to be that those two guys pick?
Well, I think it's really, really fundamental, and everybody has to be on the same page. And again, when you talk about the great organizations, there's almost everybody from ownership to all the way down to the secretaries and the people that clean the building. There is a lockstep of way that it's done. The message is always the same. There's nobody out there trying to create their own environment. Here's what happens, and again, it's a little bit of an indictment of our business, but it's the facts. Because there's so much money in it now, Tom, that guys do an awful lot to protect their own backside.
Yeah.
And one of the things I saw in the little bit of time I was in the National Football League, and certainly it's even in the Canadian Football League, anytime you're in pro football, anytime you're in pro sport where people are getting paid, there's a real tendency and a inclination, I think, with everybody inside the business to put your best interests first. Because, again, it's a very lucrative profession. You look at what Hugh Jackson's making. Well, I mean, are you willing to put that on the line to be in step with the general manager? The easiest thing is when everybody can be fun. Everybody can be on the same page when you're winning. Yeah. But it's when you start to lose that creeps in, and the more it creeps in, the worse your football team gets, and in the end, it's what you have in Cleveland.
The last thing on Cleveland right now. They've said that they want an experienced, quality, draft-aware GM now. I've heard a few people saying John Dorsey might be in the frame to take over there. How do you see that playing out? Is there any early runners and riders for you?
Well, I don't know. I think, to be honest with you, I think one of the things you're going to see here is Hugh's going to make a power play now to try and become both the general manager and the head coach, which again buys him more time and more power and more influence. It's what you saw happen in Philadelphia with Chip Kelly, and Howie Rossman got shunned out and pushed out of the building.
Yeah.
Now that was primarily because Chip had success. Now Hughes won one game in 2 years. Again, but whoever it is, he's going to want to be really in tune with that guy. So I would not be surprised if it's not somebody that has general manager experience. And certainly for Hugh, you want it to be somebody who you know and that you're comfortable with.
Maybe from the Bengals, former days, someone like that.
That would be a logical way to go. Duke Tobin is a name that is a guy that's out there that I think that Hugh has worked with in the past, and it would be a situation where, the communication would be kind of in line.
Yeah. Do you think that I said it was the last thing, but we get into these talking about these things.
I mean, it's great stuff because you got to talk about it. I mean, it's really, this is why, in my estimation, we have to continue to do this over the course of the year because there's so much that goes on.
I couldn't agree more. So do you think this is going to be one of those positions that they're going to fill almost straight away, or do you think they're going to wait until the season's done? And then
I think right now that there'll be a huge amount of information being thrown at Mr. Haslam, from agents all over the world about their guy and why their guy should be there, and it's an interesting mating dance that goes on, between the agents who are trying to get their clients in front of the owner, and then once that client's in front of the owner, they're trying to, and again, now we're talking about jobs where you have the three most dangerous, ingredients. You've got profile because you're in the National Football League. You've got power because you have the ability to make decisions about, basically about people's lives on a day-to-day basis, and you have money. So all of those things are seductive, and in a lot of cases for the agents, for example, I get 3% of whatever you make. Well, you get a $10 million contract. That's a pretty good payday.
I don't mind that.
Now, there's another agent hawking that guy over there. What am I going to do? I'm going to do everything in my power to not only make you look good, I'm going to try and do everything in my power to make him not look good.
Yeah.
And it is a vicious, vicious thing. It is not pretty. And it's not, there is no chivalry in it. And, how they say there's no honor amongst thieves. Well, that's pretty much what you're looking at.
Now, you and I, Jeff, this is a bit of a humble brag, but when we were in Texas for the Super Bowl, which was amazing, we met up with a young guy from the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and his dream was to become a general manager. What do you have to be? What kind of character do you have to be? What do you need to know to become a successful GM?
Well, I think that it's really interesting. It's changed so much in the last 20 years in the National Football League. In the past, kind of like the pathway, and I'll use Floyd Reese as an example. Floyd was a coach initially. He was a linebacker coach for Jerry Glanville in Houston. And then when Jerry went to Atlanta, he offered Floyd an opportunity to go to Atlanta with him, coach linebackers. The Oilers, Mr. Adams, the owner of the Oilers, said, no, I'd like you to stay part of the organization. We'll make you an assistant general manager. He went that route into a general manager position. That was basically the way it worked. Then, a little bit later in the evolution of the process, it was scouts that would work through personnel, and particularly if they dealt with the salary cap, they became enticing to owners because they could manage the roster, they could manage the cap, they could do those kinds of things. So it's changed a great deal, and now you look at it, and it's kind of, when you go out and you talk to, it's interesting. You go out and see these guys, and a lot of them are guys that have very limited on the field football experience.
Yeah.
They're more managers, MBA kind of guys, Harvard guys that are smart, and I mean, tell you, they're intelligent, and they're about the business of the business. And to me, the best organizations have a blend of all of those kinds of things. And again, so in Cleveland, as we talk about Cleveland, I think it's going to be interesting to see which direction they go. See, you got to understand too, Tom, Sashi was an outlier. He was a attorney in the Jags organization, and had very little football training. He and Di Puesto implemented the Moneyball scheme, that was so popular in baseball, and really, I was hopeful personally that they would succeed, because I think it would be good for the NFL to get that kind of new thinking and new blood, and I think ultimately they will succeed. It'll just be after they're gone.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. This is NFL Talk UK. It's Tom Julian, Jeff Reinebold, Paul James has joined us. Evening, fellas.
How you doing, Paul?
Jersey Paul. I think he's a big Colts fan.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, I don't know how well he's doing, Jeff.
Hey, Paul, I got to ask you, man. When I watch your football team play, they seem to every week do enough to win the game, and then in the second half they cannot close the deal. And you know, I think the positive outgrowth for the Colts of this whole thing, Tom, is that the fact that you got a young quarterback who's getting quality reps and really does show that he belongs. And I think that's going to be good for the organization when they bring Luck back, or however they choose to go in the future.
Well, and Paul's commented there, so you get your comments in, get your questions in for Jeff. We'd love to put them to him. But me and Paul were talking the other day, and I said, because we talked about it, if Andrew Luck, we're not quite sure what he's going to be, whether he's going to come back, would you sell him? Would you trade him rather? And Paul was just like, he's a top 5 quarterback on his day. He's going to catapult that team back to where they should be, kind of the championship. But he needs to be protected, right?
Absolutely.
What's the point in having a top 5 quarterback if you're just going to let him get whacked every day?
Well, I think if you really think about it, this is very, very similar to the scenario that's going on in Detroit. You've got an elite level quarterback in Detroit that's been to the playoffs, I think, once or twice in his entire career, because the supporting cast around him has never been improved to the level that it needs to be improved. They need to protect Stafford better. They need to protect Luck better. Mm-hmm. And frankly, we're going to watch, Seattle, and they've got to find a way to do more for Russell Wilson, because 80-some% of that offense goes through him right now. He's getting hit way too much. If you want to be an elite level team, and certainly that's every team's goal in the National Football League, you've got to do a better job of protecting that elite level quarterback you have, because it's hard to find him. That's in my opinion, that's Chris Ballard's biggest job in this offseason. He may have to hire a new coach, but to me, even more important than hiring the new coach is he's got to continue to churn that roster and get better.
What's interesting, you mentioned the Seahawks there, Jeff. They're obviously playing the Jags this weekend on Sky Sports. Actually, you'll be covering it live. That's the 9:25 game, I think it is. And you've got one team, the Jags, who are missing a quarterback, and you've got the other team, Seattle, who are relying so heavily.
Missing 10 other guys.
Exactly, right? They're relying so heavily on Russell Wilson's production and his kind of intuitive nature, and the way he plays the game has led him to rightly be considered as an MVP candidate for the way he carries that offense at the time. Who's going to come out on top there? Like you say, you've got 10v1.
Well, you know what? When you get into these kind of games, Tommy, I always will give the nod, if you will, to the guys that have the best defense. And right now, Jacksonville's defense is playing at an elite level. Whether it's Saxonville up front, or those two, Bouye and Ramsey, those two unbelievably good corners that they have. Barry Church has really brought them, an impact safety. You look at every level, plus Lesney, you look at every level of that defense, they're very, very good. But the guy that I think the one that, if you will, is the straw that stirs the drinks, so to speak, defensively, is Calais Campbell.
Yeah.
I just think he's so valuable to that team. He's brought not only a run stuffer and a great pass rusher inside, he's brought tremendous professionalism and leadership to a bunch of young kids that are really trying to figure out how to play. Malik Jackson, again, just like that, inside now you're dynamic, you can rush off the edge, they've got speed at every level. Gus Bradley and that bunch deserve an awful lot of the credit for this defense, because they were the ones that really put it together, and that's unfortunate, but that's, like we talked about Sashi Brown, that's the way this business works.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next guy is going to get a better job.
Just say welcome to Matt Horsted. We're going to get to your question, Matt, very, very soon, so stick with us. But just while we are talking about the Jags, that defense, you're right, and you mentioned Calais Campbell, who's already set the franchise record for sacks this year, and he's still got 4 games to go. He could build up a nice total. On the other side of the ball, the offense, we talked a little bit about Eli Manning. I didn't know how much cap room the Jags had to play with. Turns out they've got a bunch still, so they've got a lot of room to play with. With all the pieces there, is Eli the man that comes and makes that team a Super Bowl?
Well, that's going to be I mean, that is going to be the topic on every talk show from, you know, the Space Coast of Florida all the way to Long Island, because, you know, it just seems like all of the stars are aligning that way. Coughlin's there. They need a veteran quarterback. They're not going to ask Eli to you know, go out and throw it 50 times a game to win the game for them like they used to have to do in with the Giants. They need a guy that can bring veteran leadership. You know, I think that there's so many things about that thing, Tom, that point in that direction. But again, until we get down the road, it's a little tough to say. Right now, if you're the Giants, this is not a great position to be in, because if you decide to let Eli go at the end of the season, and Jacksonville's a logical landing spot for him, then you're looking at Geno Smith as your starter. Davis Webb, a guy who, and just today, Spags made Geno the third quarterback and moved Davis Webb up to second, which I think makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now he'll get some reps under fire. They'll get a chance to see him play in the regular season, which is much better evaluation than the preseason. And you got to say, okay, we're going to have a top 5 draft pick, and we're going to go Josh Rosen or one of those Sam Darnold, one of those young quarterbacks out there. And there are a couple good ones. I don't know if they're ready to lead you to the Super Bowl in the NFC East yet, but they're good young quarterbacks.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield as well is another one from the Sooners, I think he is. And yeah, I mean, there is talent out there, but you just don't know, do you, whether they're going to make that leap?
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at the history of the draft, Tom, and you know, there are a lot of first rounders that you know aren't even playing right now. And then you look at a guy like Case Keenum, who was undrafted. 32 teams passed on him 7 times.
Yeah.
And you know, here he is playing. And I really believe this. If we would just go generic uniforms, no name on the back, the whole deal, and just put football on, and you watch that kid play right now, you'd say that's a elite level, you know, top 10 NFL quarterback. And you know, credit to him, and credit to, you know, his perseverance and his toughness. He's been through a knee injury. He's been cut, I think, 3 different times, and you know, he's a great story for young kids.
Absolutely. We were talking, I should say hello to Ben McClymon, obviously not working too hard, but watching tonight. Thanks for joining us, and all the guys that have joined since we've started. We appreciate you. Keep your questions coming in. We've got a few questions that we'll get to.
Miss you, Benny.
We do miss you. We need you here. But we're enjoying the wine nonetheless. Case Keenum is a guy we talked about off the air a little bit earlier on. Mm-hmm. And this time last year he was being dropped, being benched by the Rams. The Rams were going nowhere. It was a terrible spot. I think Fisher had just been axed as well, and the Rams were in an absolute mess. Case Keenum goes to Minnesota, not necessarily gonna set the world on fire. They're obviously playing behind Bradford to start with, and then he gets his chance, and I mean, he's like a new player. It's like a new man.
Well, I happen to know this story pretty well because he was at the University of Houston when I was coaching at SMU. They were in our league. We played them every year. I'm just going to tell you, the kid set the all-time college football record for passing yardage, touchdowns, and you don't do that if you don't have ability. Now, why did he fall? Why did he not get drafted? There's a number of reasons why. They didn't like the offense that he played in. You know, again, that was that old thing about, can a spread quarterback become a, you know, NFL starter? He's 6 feet tall, barely. He runs 4.9. He doesn't have any measurable that would make you go, oh, he's a guy. But when you put the tape on and you see him compete, then you realize how good he is. I mean, like, he was so dynamic against us, and I can just remember watching him play, and you know, I was shocked that he always knew where to go with the ball. The ball was on time. The ball was accurate. So when you talk to great quarterback coaches and you ask them what's important in a quarterback, the first 2 things they're going to say are decision making and accuracy. Mm-hmm. Not arm strength, not size, not mobility, none of those things. Decision making and accuracy. And he has those. And here's a guy, again, as a Ram, completed 19 passes in a row in a game in the National Football League. So he had shown flashes of it previously. But this again speaks to how important it is that you have an offense that suits you and you have players around you that can help you play.
Vikings playing the Panthers this week. Another huge game for them. It feels like every game's a prove-it game for them. I will just say thanks hi to Jack Humphrey.
Hey, Jack.
Hi to Faye Kippen. She says,
Faye,
do you know, Jeff, and this one is completely up to you, do you know whether Tom Brady smells like bananas? That's what Faye says. I have no idea what that means. I'm hoping you do, because you've got to leave me on that one.
you know what? I don't know about that, and I'm not sure, based on, watching them play, that very many defensive linemen could tell you what Tom Brady smells like.
No, that's
because they don't get close enough to
Absolutely. Now let's go from a team, Jeff, the Vikings, who are vying for a home Super Bowl, to a team that are a little bit way off a Super Bowl at the moment. It's the San Francisco 49ers. Matt Hosted's question was about Jimmy Garoppolo and and I know Nick Ludlam's watching as well. He's a big 49ers fan. He seemed to change that offense as soon as he went there, and he's in a great system with a head coach that knows how to develop quarterbacks. Right. Is that one of the most exciting kind of partnerships that we're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I think when you look at the 49ers, and again, I thought it was really interesting the way they managed him, where there was so much hope in San Francisco as soon as they made the trade. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have a great. They handled that. I think Shanahan and Lynch handled that extremely well. They didn't rush him in. Actually, they didn't play him until they had to play him when C.J. Beathard got hurt.
Yeah.
But he went in there with an understanding of the offense, with enough time with his receivers that he was able to function through a touchdown pass right away. I watched him in the games this past Sunday, and what you see is everything that you anticipated you would see. A guy who has that kind of it factor. He can move around in the pocket. He's got certainly a strong enough arm. He's accurate. He reminds me really, interestingly enough, he reminds me of Tony Romo as a young quarterback. And, because Tony always had that escapability. He's going to compete and play the play till the last minute.
Yeah.
I think he's probably a little more disciplined, and that probably comes from his training in the Patriots in terms of his reads and how he approaches the game. But I think that's really good for San Francisco.
Did you see the stat this week where Jimmy Garoppolo's numbers were almost exactly the same as Tom Brady's from this week? They both had, I think, a 70.4 quarterback rating. They both had similar amount of passes. Their accuracy was within 0.3% of each other. It's just a little bit creepy, isn't it? I mean, and I heard that the Patriots locker room were all absolutely delighted when they heard that the 49ers won, because that's how popular Jimmy G was in that Patriots locker room.
And that's why I say that's the intangible, the unmeasurable, that the really great ones have, the ability to elevate players around you to create belief. I remember when I was coaching Doug Flutie. And Doug was our quarterback in 1991. And I'm going to tell you something. It didn't matter how far we were behind. It didn't matter what the situation was, whether on the road or home, any of it. There was such a belief amongst his teammates that as long as Doug had one more throw, we had a chance. And I remember in one game, we're down by 21 with 3 minutes left to go and come back and win the game in overtime. Wow. That's the kind of stuff Doug could do. I think Jimmy kind of creates that in the 49ers. Certainly Brady does amongst the Patriots. I mean, when you look at the Super Bowl game last year, they're so far behind and there was no panic. Yeah. They just kept playing, and I think that's what he's going to bring to them.
Absolutely. Paul sent us a question here. I'm going to have to lean in pretty close to see this one. I've always had an interesting thought. Well, we'll decide whether it's interesting or not. Paul, Brady was drafted 199th. Do you think that was actually that he was actually ever drafted with a thought of him being the player? Oh, I've lost it. Where is it?
The player that he is today?
Yeah, I can't see the last bit of it. I can't see the money maker. I've just worked out, Jeff. We can bring Paul into different cameras. Should we try
Come on
that?
In, Paul.
Right, Paul. I'm going to invite you to join the conversation here. This is a first time for NFL Talk UK. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can decline it. I'm going to work so Paul can ask his question himself.
Yeah. I tell you what, if we can get this done, this is going to be really cool because we'll be able to have communication with everybody in the UK who wants to talk football.
Absolutely. Now, it does mean that he's got to be watching at the moment. He's not making a cup of tea. Well, we can let that run and see.
If that question is what I think that question is, which is that and this is good. This is really a good question. Do you think that anybody in the Patriots organization, when they took him at 199 or whatever it was in the 6th round, thought that this guy was going to one day be the greatest quarterback, arguably the greatest quarterback that ever threw a ball in the National Football League? No chance.
No freaking way.
No chance. Because if they thought that much about him, there is no way they would have let him pass that many rounds to And again, in defense of the Patriots, if they need defending, there's no way based on his college tape that you could have predicted that. There's no way based on any of the measurements they took at the combine. I mean, I remember looking at him at the combine, and he took his shirt off. You got to walk in, you got to take your shirt off.
I remember this picture. It's so good.
He looked like he was 50 years old.
Yeah.
And there were a couple actual snickers, actually.
Yeah.
But, you cannot measure competitiveness. You cannot measure desire. You cannot measure heart. Those are things that's why it's not an exact science. And you talk to the Patriot coaches, and I know a couple of them very, very well. Chad O'Shea in particular, receiver coach. And he said, Jeff, you got to understand, this is a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he's the first guy in the meetings. He sits in the front row. He takes the most detailed notes. I mean, he's been there for 14 years or whatever it is. Obviously, that's the thing, that gets older players sooner than their physical decline is their preparation habits, or it just gets to be such a grind that they don't want to get up in the morning and go to work anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he's addicted to the game, isn't he? If you do want to ask a question, we just worked out that we can invite you guys on to ask a question to Jeff yourself. So if you do want to come on camera, drop us a little comment there, say I'm up for coming on, and I'll press the button and we'll see if we can get that working. That's pretty cool. While we're talking about the Patriots, it would be wrong of us not to mention Rob Gronkowski's getting Tre'Davious White at the weekend. I mean, the Patriots won 23-3, but nobody's talking about that. They're talking about the completely unnecessary hit, Jeff. I mean, I know Gronk talks about being held and being unfairly refereed quite a lot, and I don't know what your opinion is on that one for a start, but his hit on White, who was completely defenseless, face down, was just so out of character from him.
Well, first of all, let's talk about the holding issue. Gronk's got to understand, when you're as big as you are, and you're as fast as you are, and you're as good as you are, defenders are going to do everything they possibly can to have a chance, and that means they're going to grab and hold you. That's just, you got to you should be used to that by now, certainly at this point in your career. Next to kidnapping the bus on the way to the game, I don't know any other way that you stop the guy. So with that in mind, I just think that he got so frustrated, and all of a sudden it just snapped, and he's Jimmy Superfly Snuka coming off the turnbuckle. And I mean, it was like, you watched it and you go, he lost his mind. He has absolutely lost his mind. And it's unfortunate, but, it's one of the things that Belichick will have a great coaching moment for it.
Luckily, Gronkowski's on a bye next week. They're playing the Dolphins, so he's really not going to get missed. I won't say that to Neil Reynolds. I'll get told off for that. But I mean, he's refreshed. Then I mean, they don't need.
Hey, let me tell you something. I ran into an executive from the Jets the other day who was over here, and while we're in the NFL office doing the podcast, and I've known the guy for probably 15 years, and we were talking about this very thing, and he was like, one game. How can they only suspend him for one game? They should suspend him for 4 games.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And then I looked at the schedule. Fourth game?
Yeah.
Fourth game's the Jets. I got you.
But the next game, as soon as he comes back, they face the Steelers, and that's the game he's going to want to be back for anyway. If they wanted to punish him or punish the Patriots for not controlling him, whatever, they should have made him miss that Steelers game.
Yeah,
that's massive. That's going to be a huge one. While we're talking Steelers, they are going to be without Ryan Shazier. Who knows until how long? The linebacker. He made a tackle on Josh Malone against the Bengals, and that was a nasty game. Generally, Jeff, there was a few big hits in that, and it was ugly, to be honest, at times. But Ryan Shazier needed help getting off the field. It's tonight been announced that He's undergoing surgery. Originally, they didn't think it was going to need surgery, and we haven't heard very much since. But I mean, it doesn't sound good, does it? Like
no.
The lack of updates is quite worrying.
Well, I think that when you watch the hit, and it's the thing that you coach against so much from the time you start coaching kids, is to not use the top of your head, not use your head at all, or your face, or any of those other things. And his head got into the tackle, and that compression on your spine is not good at all. Yeah. Obviously, our prayers and thoughts are with him. He's a great young player, and certainly everybody in Pittsburgh and his family and everybody we're holding our breath for you. Again, it's interesting because the Mike Mitchell, I won't say rant, but it was, he really was passionate about what he was talking about. Yeah. It's so hard for defensive players in this game today, and it is a physical game. You know that's what you're playing when you go out to play it at any level, whether it's high school, college, or certainly in professional football. It's most violent. The league has worked tirelessly to make it as safe as we can make it, but there is a certain amount of risk in the game. Now, the thing I want to talk about is I think there's a play that happened that I see way too much. I saw Julio Jones do it. I'm not saying that they're malicious hits, and they're hits within the rules, is when a receiver on what we call a push crack block, where he runs at the corner, and if the corner commits to play run support, he blocks the corner. If the corner backs up, he immediately turns inside and goes and blocks the first man inside. Well, in this game, AB starts up the field, his corner backs out, he now goes Schuster, he goes into push crack, and it's Vontaze Burfict, and Burfict has no idea he's coming, and he hits him right in the side of the head. And if you talk about defenseless players, which is, quote, the term they use for offensive guys as they're catching the ball or running across the middle, well, there's no way that Vontaze Burfict even knew that block was coming. He can't. And I heard some knucklehead that's on talk radio or on television say, well, he's got to play with his head on the swivel. And there's no way. He is reading. He's got a run play coming right at him. His focus has to remain here. He can't be looking out here to see whether he's going to get blocked. So when those guys come in and they blindside a guy like that, that is extremely dangerous. And I think that Schuster got penalized and fined for standing over the top of him. But that, to me, was a knee-jerk reaction to the big hit.
A secondary issue.
Yeah. The issue is there's a player who's in a vulnerable position, and we're allowing guys to come in and whack them. And like I said, Julio Jones did it in the game that we covered. And, I see it every week, and I just think it's something that the league has got to take a look at.
So it's a difficult position here because the players want more power. Like you say, Mike Mitchell comes out and he says, football's football. You've got to be tough. You've got to be strong. But I agree with you. When it gets dangerous, the suspensions or the fines or whatever have to be so severe that it stops teams allowing it to happen. It stops the players wanting it to happen. Because I know that the Steelers and the Bengals, they hate each other. I know that Vontaze Burfict has had his fair share of nasty hits as well. Like, he's no angel.
Right.
But that doesn't make it right, does it? It doesn't make what Juju Schuster-Smith did any better. And if you like you say, if that had been a slightly different angle, a slightly different day, that could put Burfict in a really. We're not just talking football here. We're talking in a dangerous, critical condition. And that has to be communicated. And it needs to be something done.
I think, Tommy, there's a lot of things that we got to really examine. For example, when you protect the quarterbacks, the way they protect the quarterbacks, which I'm all for, I'm not saying don't. But when you do it to the level that they do it, and then you allow other guys to not have that same sort of protection in the game, then what you're basically saying to that player is, linebacker, you're not as valuable as to us as a business as that quarterback, which is exactly what they're saying. Yeah. Defensive lineman who gets clipped you're not as valuable as that quarterback who we can't go low on a tackle in the pocket because we've got to keep our star quarterbacks in the game. I get it; it's business. I'm not, I'm not a knucklehead. Well, I'm a knucklehead, but I guess I understand it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is those are the kinds of things I really sense that with the commissioner's new contract, which sent, I think, some ripples around the league with how big it is amongst the players, that we are heading down the road of, another, movement by the players to strike or, again, I'm afraid that's what's coming. And I think that Mike Mitchell voiced that last night in his rant. And I think that it's something we need as a league to get in front of as fast as we can.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're into week 14, Jeff. It's coming around quick, right?
It's amazing. It's how fast it goes. But you know what? It's so incredible. We always talk about that. We say the business end of the season, Tommy. But man, is it ratcheted up now?
Oh yeah. And we've got an exciting game tonight. I know it's an interesting one, Thursday night football in Britain, because most of us go to work the next morning. You can't watch it. You watch the highlights or whatever. So a lot of people maybe watching this aren't going to watch it live. But it is a massive game tonight. It's an exciting Thursday night football. You've got the Saints and the Falcons. And Jeff, you look at the Saints, who are 9-3, and the Falcons, who are still in the race for winning their division, the NFC South, at 7-5. It's a must-win for the Falcons now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the way I see it too. And what's so unique about this game, Tom, is that it's such a big game, following both teams having huge games last weekend. And it's on a short week. Mm-hmm. So you're really only on a Thursday game. If you've played on Sunday, the players have to have a day off by Players Association rule. You really basically have one practice day, and they're still beat up and sore on that practice day, so you're not going to do anything very physical. You travel, and then you play a game again. And so, that adds a whole nother dimension to this. Now, is Marshawn Lattimore going to be ready to play tonight? That is a big, big, big deal, because if Lattimore is, then I think the Saints have a great chance, because they need to have a guy that they can put on Julio Jones. And, we saw last week the impact of, Xavier Rhodes when he's able to go match up with Julio Jones. It's in Atlanta. It's a hard place to play. The Saints typically don't play well on the road. Atlanta knows that there is no tomorrow. Mathematically, yes, there is, but realistically, you're going to have to now hope for some help out of other teams. You're losing the ability to, control your own destiny, if you will. So this is a huge game. I think that for the Falcons, I think they'll understand the gravity of the game. I think that they played well enough against a very, very, very good Minnesota team. And I don't think that the Saints defense is the same level as that Viking defense.
We've talked a lot about Alvin Kamara, the Saints running back, as a potential Rookie of the Year candidate, but you mentioned him there, Jeff. On the other side of the ball, Marshawn Lattimore, should he be in that conversation as well?
Well, I think so. Now, it's going to hurt him a little bit that he's missed some games.
Yeah.
Again, it's such a we always say it. This is a what have you done for me league, right? Because the first 4 weeks, you could have said, and I was one of the ones that was saying it, that, Kareem Hunt is going to be the Rookie of the Year in the National Football League. Yeah. And in the last 7 weeks, I think he's rushed for 100 yards one time, and he's completely dropped off the face of the earth in terms of conversation about Rookie of the Year. And Kamara has done nothing but continue to gain steam in that conversation. So I think Kamara right now, with a month left to play, is the favorite. Mm-hmm. But that's, that can change, very quickly.
Mm. And from a coaching standpoint, Jeff, how do you stop a player like Kamara, who's had a brilliant season? There's no doubt about that. How do you stop him having a bit of a second season syndrome? We talked about Todd Gurley being this unbelievable runner, and then the second season he was a real disappointment. You need the same from Kamara. How do you do that as a coach?
Well, I think there are a couple things, Tommy. When you talk about rookies, first of all, let's talk about rookies. Mm-hmm. There's basically a wall. It's referred to as the rookie wall. And it's because these kids have never in their lives gone through what they're going through in the National Football League. In college football training camps, it's 3 weeks, usually maybe a month, play a game. In the NFL, they graduate from college, they come to minicamp, they've been through OTAs, then they come to training camp. Training camp is 4 preseason games, right? So it's 6 or 7 weeks long. So they're already 3 weeks longer and 4 games into their season before they would even start it in college. Yeah. Then they play a 16-game schedule, not a 12-game schedule. And the practices, the meetings. In college football, you're only allowed to have your players for 20 hours a week. That's it. You can't access them more than that because they have to go to class. They have to do their, that's what they're there for, is to go to school.
Absolutely.
But in the NFL, special teams meeting starts at 7 o'clock in the morning. They'll be there till 5, 6, 7 at night. So you're looking at a 10 or 12-hour day every day except the one day you get off. And the learning is just so much more than what they face in college football. And college football, frankly, has gone the other way. The game has been so simplified now. It's basically everybody spread all over the field, my guy against your guy, and let's go play. Mm-hmm. So the learning that they get, the teaching is so much more intense and so many more things that they have to know to go into play a game well. So they hit a wall usually around Thanksgiving time. And particularly if that guy's got to play an awful lot as a rookie. And I would imagine Kareem Hunt has hit the wall. Mm-hmm. Where Kamara has a better chance to not hit the wall is the fact that he's been sharing the load with Ingram. Yeah. And then during the off season, that'll be another experience for him because, in college football, you played in your bowl game, you went to off-season program as soon as you came back from Christmas break or after the bowl season. You went to spring ball, and it was all laid out for you. You get in the pros, and you're going to have a month, maybe a month and a half, where the coaches can't even talk to you. They can't even communicate with you. So are you going to be an Eddie Lacy and go out and, get fat during that time because you've got all kinds of money in your pocket that you've never had before? Everybody wants to, party with you and all that. So a lot of temptations.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Well, let's get back to Thursday night, Jeff. I've got a fact for you. In his last 6 games, Matt Ryan, Falcons quarterback, has averaged 320 yards against the Saints. So since 2014, he's run riot over the Saints. Obviously, the tables have turned a little bit. The Saints have been quite disappointing over the last few years. Now they're rocketing up. Falcons maybe not the team that they were last year. How do you see Matt Ryan playing?
Well, I think Matt Ryan has the potential to throw for another 350 or like that. The issue is going to be whether he's going to get enough attempts because I think the game plan for New Orleans particularly will be when you go on the road. One of the things you want to do is take the crowd out of the game. How do you do that? Well, you get on top early. You take the ball. You run the ball. You use the clock. You get you take the emotion out of the stadium. Don't give up big plays. Don't throw interceptions, fumble the ball. Give them a chance to get momentum on their side. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine Sean Payton's talked at length to his team about that. We've got to minimize the crowd. We've got to keep Matt Ryan on the sidelines. We've got to possess the ball. Again, be really good on third down. And I think that's their recipe for success.
Well, we shall see. You're going to give us a prediction, Coach?
I'm going to tell you something. It's really tough. And if I knew that Marshawn Lattimore was going to play, I might give a nod to the Saints who are playing at such a high level. And again, you're talking about 1-8 of their last 9. But on the other side of the coin, I have a lot of faith in Dan Quinn and his ability to, message his team and get them ready to play. And I look for Julio to have a monster game.
Yeah, well, he needs to bounce back after going from 250 yards down to 24. It's time for Julio to step up again. Right, we've got to go because I think my phone might die any second. We've got some warnings about that. Thank you so much for the guys that sent us questions. We appreciate it. We've learned some technology that we might be able to invite people in for next week, so that's really good. If you want to get involved, let us know and we'll make sure that happens because that's why we're doing this thing. We want your questions, we want your opinions and your hot takes. So
absolutely,
that's the excitement, isn't it? Jeff will be on your screens on Sky Sports on Sunday night. They've got some decent games coming up this week, Coach. It's an exciting week, isn't it?
It's huge, and each week gets bigger, and we hope to bring you all of the big games all the way through to the playoffs and all the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. So we'll be here next week, as always, digesting all the NFL action. It's always massive at this time of the season. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you very soon. Take care. Cheers.
Aloha.